Wealthy surgeon Dr. Darren Kingsley disguised himself as a farmhand to search for his runaway sister. In his quest, he ended up in a quiet rural town where he met Nadine, the daughter of a farmer who worked the fields with him. But would Darren ever find his sister? And what would he do if, the longer he stayed, the more he found himself drawn to Nadine? Could he help Nadine achieve her dream of becoming a doctor like him? Darren had so many questions on his mind, especially since Nadine didn't know his true identity. He had planned to confess everything to her, but couldn't bring himself to stop pretending. He was about to reveal the truth until he found out something troubling. Nadine had a serious issue. She didn't want to fall in love with a rich man. What would become of Darren and Nadine's story? Would they end up together? Once again, this is your narrator, Mr. Hope, bringing you another extraordinary true life story. Darren had just exited the operating room after performing surgery on a woman with ovarian cancer. As soon as he entered his office, he picked up his phone and frowned when he saw it was flooded with missed calls from his mom. Worried, he called her back right away while slipping off his white coat. "What's wrong, Mom?" Darren asked. "It's your sister. She ran away," answered Lizelle, crying on the other end. "Why would she do that? Did you scold her?" Darren sat down heavily on the couch, letting out a sigh. "She asked for money and I didn't give it to her. Next thing I knew, half her things were gone." "Why didn't you give her the money? She's a student. It's normal for her to have school expenses and projects," Darren said, shaking his head. He was already exhausted from work and now he had to deal with another crisis. "I know she has projects, but lately she's been asking for money more and more often. I just found it strange how fast she's been going through her allowance. I give her a good amount each time," Lizelle explained with sadness in her voice. Darren exhaled deeply. He knew there were other things his mom and sister fought about. If money was the only reason she ran away, it felt like a shallow excuse. "Does Dad know?" Darren asked. "No, I didn't tell him. He's in Europe for something important and I didn't want to bother him. Please find your sister before he comes home," Lizelle pleaded through tears. "Okay, just relax and wait for my call. I'm not coming home until I find her," Darren promised. "Thank you, son," Lizelle replied before ending the call. Darren leaned back, exhausted. He didn't know where to begin. He tried calling his sister's phone first, but was disappointed to find it turned off. He filled out a leave form and headed to the hospital director's office. "What's this?" asked Julian, his friend and the hospital's director. "I need to take a 7-month leave. My sister ran away and I have to find her. My mum's hysterical, and my dad doesn't know anything." "No problem. Honestly, you don't even have to come back. I'm just grateful you put me in this position. You were supposed to be in charge, not me. Being a hospital director is exhausting. I never wanted the job anyway. I know you're more than capable," Julian said sincerely. "By the way, did you ask your mum why your sister ran away?" Julian asked. "She said it was about money, but I know there's more to it. I'll find out when I get there," Darren replied. "Try asking Elle," Julian suggested. Darren raised an eyebrow. "Why? You know Elle?" "She's my girlfriend," Julian said proudly. Darren frowned. "Since when are you dating someone that young? That's not right." "She's 21 and has a job. There's nothing wrong with it," Julian replied, smiling. "Still, that age gap is huge. Doesn't look good," Darren muttered. "Too late. She already said yes, and don't you dare try to get her to break up with me. That'll be the end of our friendship," Julian warned. "Whatever," Darren sighed. Elle was his niece, his cousin's daughter who lived in the States. She had her own house in the city and worked as a bank teller at Golden Valley Bank. Her salary was decent, but Darren's concern now was his sister May, 19 years old and still in school. He worried where she might have gone. "Go home and rest for now, man. You'll find May faster once you're refreshed, Julian said, patting him on the back. Darren nodded and rushed out of Julian's office, half running out of the hospital. At the parking lot, he got into his car and sped off. Darren lived in his own home in a gated community near the city. His parents' house was 4 hours away, and he didn't like the long commute. He went home, showered, and rested briefly. That night, he decided to eat out and called Elle to let her know he'd drop by and talk. She agreed and said she'd wait for him. When Darren arrived at the restaurant, he ordered a lot of food. He hadn't eaten anything decent all day and didn't want to get sick. He had too much to do. An hour later, he arrived at Ellie's house and rang the doorbell. She opened the gate with a smile. "Come in, Uncle," Elle greeted, widening the gate. "Thanks, Elle. Do you have any idea where May could be? Mom's really worried," Darren asked as he stepped inside. "Let's talk inside," Elle replied, leading the way. "Thanks again, Elle," Darren said, smiling. They sat across from each other on the living room couch. Elle took a deep breath. "The last time I saw May, she invited me to a restaurant. She said she and Aunt Lizelle fought after your mom caught her on a video call with some guy. Your mom found out the guy was her boyfriend, and he's older than her. Since then, your mom kept scolding her. If May asked for money for tuition or projects, she was refused," Elle explained. Darren frowned. He'd been too busy with work to know what was happening at home. "Do you know the guy?" Darren asked. "I only saw his face once. May never told me his name. He's not from here, though. She said he lives in a rural town called Silver Creek," Elle replied. Darren shook his head. May was too young for a boyfriend. He understood his mom's frustration, but why hadn't she just told him the truth? If May had come to him, he could have guided her without all this drama. "Do you think she ran off with him?" Darren asked, closing his eyes. If his father found out, he'd blow up. Darren didn't know what to do or where to start. "I can't say for sure, but it's possible. When Julian told me about it earlier, I tried calling May, but her phone's still off. I also checked her social media, but no updates." Elle trailed off. Soon after, she walked him to the gate. Darren drove off into the night. Tomorrow he would begin his journey to Silver Creek to find his sister. He wouldn't come home until he brought her back. The next morning, Darren woke up early to prepare for his trip. His plan was to head to Silver Creek and find May. To blend in with the locals, he had to pretend to be a simple guy. He was willing to do whatever it took, not returning until he found his sister. He decided not to bring his car. Instead, he took some cash for his expenses, unsure what challenges awaited him there. He also avoided bringing credit cards or anything expensive to avoid drawing attention. No one could find out who he really was or what his profession was. He planned to stop by a thrift store later to buy cheap clothes for the trip. An hour later, he arrived at the bus terminal with a modest-sized backpack. He wore a plain black hoodie and brown sandals. Darren also brought various types of medicine in case he got sick while he was away. He noticed a man on a motorcycle parked near a cigarette stall and approached him. "Good morning, brother. Are you familiar with how to get to Silver Creek? I'm going there today, but I don't know the way. I have family I want to visit," Darren explained. "Yes, sir. I live in the nearby town of Santa Ynez. You can ride with me. I'll pass by there," said the man, Edward. "I'll pay for the ride. How much would you charge?" Darren asked. "No need to pay. I'll take you for free, sir. I'm not a motorcycle taxi or anything. I'm just heading back home to the province. I quit my job here in the city temporarily," Edward replied. "All right, sounds good. And don't call me sir." "We're the same age," Darren said with a smile. Edward nodded, started the motorcycle, and handed Darren a helmet, which he accepted and put on. After a few hours, they were cruising along the highway. Darren sat carefully so he wouldn't fall off, as Edward was driving fast. As the wind brushed his face and the sun shone on him, Darren hoped that this trip would lead him to May, so he could go back home and return to the hospital. After several more hours, Darren felt the heat of the day intensely, sweat dripping down his face. He wasn't used to wearing a helmet, but he had to for safety. "You good back there, brother?" Edward called out. "Yeah, no problem," Darren replied. "It's scorching hot and we've still got a long way to go. We'll get there tonight. My town comes first, before Silver Creek," Edward explained. "That's fine," Darren answered. By the time they reached Santa Ynez, Edward's hometown, it was already dark. Darren's lower back and hips ached from the long ride, but he ignored the exhaustion. His thoughts were still consumed by his sister May. "Crash at my place tonight, brother. I'll take you to Silver Creek tomorrow morning," Edward suggested. "No problem," Darren agreed. "But my house is deeper into the countryside. It'll take a few more minutes," Edward warned. "That's okay. Aren't you going to grab something for your family, like food or something to cook later?" Darren asked. "No need. Only my younger brother is at home and he's disabled. Our parents passed away a long time ago. He lives there with his girlfriend," Edward explained. "Oh, what kind of disability does he have?" Darren asked, the doctor in him kicking in. He also sensed that Edward might be struggling financially. "He's blind, both eyes," Edward answered. "Was he born that way, or did something happen?" Darren asked again. "When he was 10, we lived on a farm, and there was a landslide. Rocks hit both of his eyes, leaving him blind. A doctor once said it could be corrected, but I never had enough money to look for an eye donor. Now he's in his 20s and still blind. Thankfully, he found a girlfriend who accepts him for who he is. She takes care of him daily, so I feel better leaving him here in the province," Edward said. "If you were given the chance for your brother to see again, would you agree to surgery?" Darren asked. "Of course, I want him to see the beauty of the world again," Edward replied. "Just have faith. One day that wish will come true," Darren said. "I hope so," Edward responded. A moment later, Darren handed Edward some money so he could bring something home for his brother. Edward initially refused, clearly embarrassed. "Take it, Edward. Your brother will be happy if you bring him something. Please," Darren insisted. "No, it's okay, brother. I don't need to buy anything," Edward said, shaking his head. "This is my way of thanking you. You got me here safely. Truthfully, I shouldn't even trust you, since we just met, but I can tell you're a good person," Darren said with a smile. "All right, you win," Edward said, chuckling as he finally accepted the money. Edward walked to the store, while Darren waited by the roadside with the motorcycle. While waiting, Darren messaged his friend Julian to ask if any eye donors were available. Edward had a good heart, and Darren felt it was his responsibility to make that wish happen. He'd even cover all the costs. But first, he had to find his sister. Half an hour later, they arrived at Edward's home. The house had wooden walls and a tin roof. There was electricity in this part of the province, so it wasn't dark. A girl, about Elle's age, came out to greet them. She smiled warmly, especially at Edward. Darren could tell she was genuinely kind and loving toward Edward's brother. Not many women would be that devoted to a blind man. Soon, a young man stepped out of the house, guided by the woman. One hand rested on her shoulder, the other touched the doorframe. "Is that you, bro? You're home?" asked Romy, smiling. "I didn't have load to call, and I'm not going back to the city anymore. I'll be staying here now. Rona can't take care of everything forever. She's got her own life to live," Edward said. Rona just smiled, seemingly unbothered by the responsibility. "She works online, so she still earns while staying at home. I'm thankful she also helps out with her parents, so we don't have issues with them," Romy said with a big grin. Darren was impressed. Romy was cheerful, despite his blindness. He even managed to smile sweetly. "This is my new friend, Darren. He's staying here for the night. He's heading to Silver Creek tomorrow," Edward explained. "Good evening, Romy. I'm Darren. It's a pleasure to meet you," Darren said, climbing the steps to shake Romy's hand. Romy smiled widely and reached for Darren's face, his hand gently exploring until it rested on Darren's nose. "You're handsome, bro. Sharp nose," Romy said with a grin. "Not really," Darren replied with a chuckle. After chatting for a bit, they all decided to go inside for dinner. Edward had already bought some cooked food earlier. Now Darren sat in the guest room, unable to sleep. His mind was still occupied with thoughts of his sister. The next morning, Darren was up before anyone else. With a towel slung over his shoulder, he stepped outside. The rooster's crow echoed from the neighbors' homes in the distance. Meanwhile, Nadine was already up early, preparing breakfast for her father, who would soon be heading to work in the rice fields. Ever since her mother died during childbirth, it had been just the two of them. Her father never remarried, and Nadine had grown up caring for him. "You're up early again," said Delvin, yawning as he entered the kitchen, pulling out a chair to sit. It was still dark out, and he looked sleepy. "Yeah, I'm just packing your lunch for later," Nadine replied. Her father worked for a landowner in the area. What made it better was that the landowner paid in both rice shares and a monthly salary. He was a good boss, which made Delvin's job more stable. "You don't have to do all this. You're taking such good care of me. You might end up growing old without getting married," Delvin joked, smiling. "How can I get married, Dad? We live in the middle of nowhere." Nadine laughed, but her smile faded quickly. She remembered her past relationship, back in high school, when she thought a boy truly loved her. But when he found out she came from a poor background, he changed completely. His affection vanished the moment he realized they weren't from the same social class. It was a painful experience, and ever since, Nadine had vowed never to fall for a wealthy guy again. She believed many rich people only saw status, not love. Her dad once mentioned that his boss was young and wealthy, but she had tuned him out. It didn't matter to her. "Well, if you want, you could go to town and find a date," Delvin teased with a grin. "Seriously, Dad? You're the one telling me that now?" Nadine frowned. "Just say the word. I've got some cash. You can go out and enjoy yourself," Delvin offered. "No thanks, Dad. I'm not in a hurry to get married. I'll just stay here and plant some vegetables I can sell in town," Nadine replied. "All right, it's up to you," Delvin said, grabbing his towel and stepping out back to bathe from the outdoor pump. Once the rice finished cooking, Nadine took a banana leaf and packed her father's lunch. The leaf gave the rice a nice fragrance and taste. Her dad didn't like using plastic containers. She added 5 pieces of fried fish, wrapped everything neatly, and packed a small water container for him as well. Soon, Delvin was ready to leave. "Here's your lunch, Dad. You almost forgot it again," Nadine reminded him. "Thanks, I'm heading out. You take care here, okay?" Delvin said. "I'm going to ask around if anyone wants to work in the fields. I'm the only one left now." "Where'd everyone else go?" Nadine asked. "They all left for the city, looking for work. Most of the young men around here never finished school, so they do whatever they want," Delvin replied. "That's true, Dad. All right then, be careful," Nadine said, smiling as she waved him off. Ever since her mother died, it had just been the two of them. Nadine couldn't bear to leave her father alone, especially when he got sick. She watched him walk away until he was out of sight, then went back inside to eat. Meanwhile, Darren had already stepped outside after breakfast. He had asked Edward for his number earlier, just in case he needed help. His backpack was ready by his side, and he was just waiting. "You ready to go, brother?" Edward asked. "Yeah, hope you're not too busy today," Darren replied. "Nope, I've got nothing planned. Let's go," Edward said, smiling. Soon, Darren climbed onto the back of the motorcycle, and they began their trip. The wind was cold against Darren's skin. He had bathed early, and the weather in the countryside was so different from the polluted city air. After an hour and a half, they reached Silver Creek, but not the main town. They stopped along a road surrounded by rice paddies. Some areas were fully grown, others were still being cleared. In the distance, Darren saw an elderly man working slowly, pulling weeds from the rice field. The area was wide, and the man was alone. "I'll stay here, Edward. I'll call you if I need anything. We exchanged numbers, remember?" Darren said, hopping off the motorcycle. "All right, brother," Edward said with a smile. Darren pulled some money from his wallet and handed it over. "Take this for the trouble." "No need. You already gave me a lot yesterday. Keep it for your expenses," Edward replied. "All right then. Thanks," Darren smiled. "I'll head out now," Edward said, revving the motorcycle and speeding away. Darren watched him leave, then turned his gaze toward the old man still working. Slowly, he walked down the narrow path leading to him, careful not to disturb the rice plants. The old man hadn't noticed Darren's approach, so he cleared his throat to get his attention. The man looked up and smiled. "Good morning, son. You might have taken a wrong turn," the old man said kindly. "No, I meant to come here. I'm Darren from Santa Ynez. I'm looking for work," Darren replied. "The main town of Silver Creek is up ahead. What kind of work are you looking for? By the way, I'm Delvin," the old man said. "Any kind of job is fine, as long as it pays," Darren answered with a smile. "Are you sure?" "I'm actually looking for someone to help me here in the field. The others who used to work here left, so I've been alone. Maybe you'd like to work with me," Delvin offered. "No problem." "How many people do you need?" Darren asked. "3, ideally. The field's pretty wide. 5 sections haven't been planted yet. If we work on them all at once, they'll be ready for harvest in March," Delvin explained. "All right, I'll tell my friend Edward to join. That way you won't need to look for more help," Darren suggested. "That would be a great help. Edward was from the province after all. He probably knew how to work the fields. Though he had lived in the city, he must have had some experience. Darren, on the other hand, planned to stay a while. He wanted to be the one to personally find May. "Good. I'll let the landowner know there'll be new workers and make sure your pay is included next month," Delvin said with a smile. "Oh, so this isn't your field, sir?" Darren asked. "No, I just work here. The land belongs to Mr. Dominic. He's around your age. He owns this farm and the surrounding lands. He's a good man. That's why I've stayed," Delvin explained. "I see," Darren replied. Soon, he joined Delvin in pulling out dead rice plants near the edge of the field. He rolled up his pants to keep them clean, planning to eventually wade into the center. "Next time, buy some boots, Darren." "There are leeches around. You might get bitten," Delvin warned. "All right, don't you wear any, though?" Darren asked. "I don't have the money, but I've gotten used to it," Delvin said. "I'll call Edward now so he can come right away," Darren said, stepping out of the mud. "Go ahead," Delvin replied. Darren wiped the mud off his hands onto his shirt and pulled out his phone. He found Edward's number and called. "Hey, Edward, where are you?" Darren asked. "I'm still at home. I was about to head into town and look for a job," Edward replied. "No need. Come work with us in the field. Delvin's looking for help," Darren said. "Sure thing," Edward agreed. "Bring some lunch with you, and on your way through town, grab some canned goods and 3 pairs of boots. Pay for them for now. I'll give you the money when you get here," Darren said. "Got it, brother," Edward replied before ending the call. Darren returned to work, pulling out more dead rice plants. Surprisingly, he enjoyed it. If May hadn't run away, he never would have experienced something like this. He had newfound respect for hard-working farmers toiling under the heat, walking through muddy fields all day. Luckily, Darren had a hoodie with him, so the sun didn't bother him much. He was sweating heavily, but he didn't stop. He was embarrassed to take a break while Delvin kept going. Later that afternoon, Nadine was watering her vegetable garden behind their house when she heard a motorcycle stop out front. She walked toward the front and saw her father stepping off a motorcycle with two men. But her eyes focused on the tall, fair-skinned man with them. He was striking, and she had no idea how her father knew him. "Good afternoon, Dad. You've got company," Nadine said, walking up to him and giving him a respectful hand gesture. The man who had driven the motorcycle smiled at her, but the fair-skinned one didn't. He seemed a bit aloof. She sensed he might be snobbish. "These are my new workers for the field. This is Edward and that's Darren." Delvin introduced them. Nadine couldn't believe Darren was a field worker. His pale skin looked like it would shy away from dirt. "Nice to meet you, Nadine," Darren said, smiling and extending his hand. She shook his hand. His skin was soft and smooth, softer than Edward's. She also shook Edward's hand. "Pleasure to meet you both," Nadine replied. Her father went inside, followed by the two men. "Did you cook dinner, sweetheart?" Delvin asked. "No, Dad, I didn't. There's a town celebration tonight. Captain Louis stopped by earlier and invited you," Nadine answered. "Perfect. We're starving," Delvin said. "When are we going?" Nadine asked. "Tonight, so nobody sees how much we're going to eat," Delvin chuckled. Darren grinned, and Nadine quickly shut her mouth, noticing him. Darren was surprised to find out that the beautiful girl was Delvin's daughter. He had assumed the old man only had sons. "All right, Dad," Nadine replied. "Let Darren use your room, sweetheart. He'll stay there tonight. I'll sleep in the living room," Delvin said. "Yes, Dad," she answered. Darren saw Nadine head to her room, while Delvin went to the kitchen. Darren and Edward were left in the living room. Darren leaned back on the bamboo chair, sighing from exhaustion. His body ached from working in the field all day. It had caught him off guard, and now his whole body was sore. He silently wished to find his sister soon so he could return home. He planned to call his mum later in case May had gone back already. "You heading home tonight, Edward?" Darren asked. "Probably not. I don't like traveling alone at night. I'll head back tomorrow morning. The problem is I didn't bring any clothes," Edward said, shaking his head. "No problem. I have extra clothes I don't wear. Pants, even new boxers. We can't go to the festival looking this muddy. What if we run into some pretty ladies?" Darren teased, grinning. Edward burst out laughing. "We don't need anyone else. Nadine's more than enough," he replied, blushing. "Oh man, you like her? Watch out. Delvin's got a sharp machete," Darren joked. "I've seen it. I don't want to be sliced open with that thing," Edward whispered. "Then behave," Darren said. "Honestly, though, I think you and Nadine look good together," Edward said, tapping his shoulder. "Of course we do. I'm handsome," Darren said with a playful grin. Nadine was indeed beautiful, typical rural beauty, fresh-looking and untouched by chemicals. Their conversation paused when Nadine stepped out of her room. "I've prepared your bed, Darren," she said with a smile. "Thanks, Nadine. By the way, where do you fetch water? We'd like to bathe," Darren asked. "There's a pump beside the house. You can bathe there," she replied. Darren glared at Edward, who was nudging his side playfully, clearly trying to pair them up. "All right," Darren said. Once Nadine left for the kitchen, Darren stood up and entered the room, placing his backpack on the floor. He lay down on the bed to rest. Edward soon joined him, sitting on the floor and leaning against the wall. "You know, bro, festivals in the countryside are so much fun. There'll be dancing later, It's like a disco in the city, Edward said. That sounds fun, but I'm hopeless at dancing, Darren replied with a laugh. But you drink, right? Edward asked. Sometimes, only on special occasions, Darren replied. He was usually so busy at the hospital that he never had the chance to drink or get drunk. We should drink later. Helps take the stress off, Edward suggested. Sure, why not? Let's shower first. We're probably holding everyone up, Darren said, standing up. He grabbed his backpack from the floor and searched for clothes to give Edward. After finding a suitable set, he handed them over. Edward left the room first, followed by Darren with his phone in hand. It was already dark outside. Darren saw Edward beginning to shower and found a spot a little farther away, sitting on a large rock. He checked his phone and saw several missed calls from his mum. He immediately called her back. It might be important. Hello, Mum. Sorry, I didn't see your calls. I've been busy, Darren said. Where have you been? I've been calling all day. Please don't add to my stress, Elle replied. I'm the one searching for May, Mom. Don't worry, I'm doing everything I can to bring her home, Darren said. Thank you, son. Be careful. I hope you find your sister soon. I don't have the strength to tell your father what's happened. I don't know how he'll react, Elle said, her voice filled with concern. It's hard to hide something like this, Mom. He's going to find out eventually, Darren said, shaking his head. He's already here. We're eating out right now, Elle added, before hanging up. Darren put his phone back in his pocket and approached Edward, who was still showering. All right, Edward, you've been out here forever. Do you not want to leave anymore? Darren teased. It feels so good, man. The weather's so hot, Edward replied, smiling. Well, it's my turn now. We don't want to be late, Darren said. Okay, Edward replied and moved aside to get dressed. Darren quickly took his shower. He had been feeling hungry for a while now, and it was time to freshen up. An hour later, they were walking toward the village captain's house. Edward didn't bring the motorcycle, since they couldn't all ride together anyway. Darren looked around as they walked, occasionally glancing at the houses, hoping to catch a glimpse of his sister. You okay, Darren? What are you looking at? Nadine asked. Nothing, just thinking. There are a lot of houses in this area, Darren replied. Yeah, but most people work in the city now, Nadine explained. They had a moment to talk, since they were walking behind Delvin and Edward, who were up ahead. When they reached the captain's house, there were already a lot of people. Some had already eaten, while others were just arriving. Darren scanned the faces of the women around him, hoping to spot his sister, but his eyes grew tired from searching. She wasn't there. Is it always this crowded during festivals? Darren asked. Yep, everyone's invited. The captain has to prepare enough food for all the guests, Nadine replied, smiling. Darren began to feel awkward as he realized people were looking at him. He had drawn a lot of attention. He quickly invited Nadine inside when Delvin called them in. This was Darren's first time attending a rural festival. It was fun, so many people. Inside, everyone paused to look at him. He smiled to ease the tension. A long table filled with food stood in front of them, and he couldn't help but feel hungry. He noticed a bald man shaking hands with Delvin, probably the captain. A woman handed them each a plate and spoon, inviting them to serve themselves. Darren didn't hesitate. He immediately grabbed food, having been starving for hours. Because space was tight, Darren took Nadine's plate and served her food as well. Thankfully, she didn't complain, even though he piled a lot on. Nadine sat on an empty chair at the side and began to eat. She noticed all the women staring at Darren. Who wouldn't, with a guy that handsome showing up in their town? Darren sat beside her. Can you even finish all that? Darren asked. No way, this is too much, Nadine said, frowning. Why didn't you say something earlier? Darren teased. I was shy. Nadine replied. Shy? You? Darren laughed. Of course, you're such a tease, Nadine said, lightly pinching his arm. Darren was easy to talk to. Nadine quickly grew comfortable around him. She didn't know why, but it was natural. They began eating together, and Nadine didn't even realize she had finished her heaping plate of food. Half an hour later, she and Darren stood up and brought their plates to the kitchen. Edward approached them. Done eating? Edward asked. Yeah, we're heading out, Darren replied. Let's go to the community center. The dancing's probably starting. They're selling beer there now, Edward said. Are you treating us? Nadine teased. Of course, Edward answered. Nadine looked around for her dad but didn't see him. Where's Dad? Weren't you two together? She asked. He's with his buddies. Said they're drinking tonight because of the festival, Edward replied. Come with us. We're not leaving you here alone, Darren said with a smile, gently guiding her out. What if Dad looks for me? Nadine asked. He won't. Besides, I can tell you don't have many friends here. Maybe your attitude scares them off, Edward teased. You're so mean. I'm just not outgoing, but I'm nice, Nadine said with a grin. She looked at Darren, who was smiling back at her and Edward. These two were fun to be around. She thought about how nice it would have been to have an older brother. Too bad her mum never gave her a sibling. Just kidding. Edward laughed and walked ahead. As they made their way to the community center, more people joined them. Some looked envious, maybe thinking Nadine was lucky to be walking with two handsome men. Hopefully both were single, so the other girls in town could get a chance too. When they reached the center, the dancing had started. The dance floor was full of people with all sorts of styles, some nearly crawling on the ground with their moves. Others shouted with joy, wide smiles on their faces. Clearly, everyone was enjoying themselves. You okay, Nadine? Why are you smiling? Darren asked. Nadine scratched her head, not realizing he had been watching her. They're fun to watch. I could never dance like that, she said. All that dancing must be exhausting. I don't even want to go back for more food, Darren joked. Nadine laughed. You already ate a mountain of food. I had to. I didn't want to get hungry again, and I didn't want to dance either. I might lose my appetite, Darren said. Just admit it. You can't dance, Nadine teased. You got me, Darren laughed. They didn't notice that Edward had disappeared. He had found a spot nearby, called them over, and they joined him. A bottle of beer and some snacks were already on the table. You really went straight for the beer, huh? Nadine said to Edward, raising an eyebrow. Just once in a while, for courage, to find a girlfriend tonight, Edward joked. Don't turn girls into bar snacks. That's not right, Nadine said, pulling up a chair. Darren joined them, but stayed quiet, simply observing the crowd dancing in the middle. He felt at ease just watching. Do you have a sister, Edward? Do you also not want her drinking beer or alcohol? Nadine asked. My sibling's a brother. He doesn't drink either. He knows alcohol isn't good for your body. If you overdo it, you become an alcoholic and waste your money, Edward answered, then took a sip. That makes sense. What about you, Darren? Are you the strict type of brother? Nadine asked. Darren looked her way and smiled, which made Nadine's heart skip a beat. She didn't know why, but there was something so attractive about him. Anyone would be drawn to his presence. I'm not strict. I'm actually supportive of my only sister. When you try to control someone too much, they tend to rebel, Darren replied. That's true, Nadine agreed. A moment later, they had finished the bottle of beer, but didn't go for another. Edward excused himself and left for a moment, leaving Darren and Nadine alone, seated at the edge of the area. The night deepened, and the crowd grew larger. The music was getting louder. Nadine started to feel cold. She had forgotten to bring a jacket. You okay, Nadine? Darren asked. I'm fine, she said with a smile. She suddenly felt Darren's jacket drape over her shoulders, making her smile even more. These men working with her father were not just polite, they were thoughtful too. "Wear my jacket for now. I noticed you're getting cold," Darren said with a kind smile. "What about you?" Nadine asked. "I'm used to the cold," Darren replied. An hour passed and Edward still hadn't returned. Nadine also started to wonder where her dad was. He was probably already tipsy from drinking. After finishing her soft drink, Nadine stood up and asked the vendor for a plastic bag to pack the leftover snacks. She looked over at Darren. "Are you sleepy yet?" Nadine asked. "Not really. Let's wait for Edward so we can all head home together," Darren replied with a smile. "Okay," Nadine said, while Darren began feeling sleepy and sore. They had worked 2 plots in the rice field that day, and it wasn't easy pulling out weeds and dead rice stalks, especially since the soil had hardened under the sun, with no rain to soften it. But he didn't want to complain or ask to leave. He wanted to enjoy the night too, especially since Edward carried so much emotional weight from his blind brother. Nadine, too, was clearly enjoying herself watching the dancers. Darren grinned when the upbeat music was replaced by love songs. Girls rushed away from the center to avoid being paired with drunk men looking for dance partners. Some were chasing each other playfully. From a distance, Darren spotted Edward already dancing with someone. He then glanced to his side and saw Nadine smiling as she watched the dancing couples. Darren leaned down and offered his hand. "Can I have this dance, Nadine?" "Just for a few minutes." "I don't think your dad would mind," Darren asked, smiling. Nadine froze, staring at him, but she still reached out and took his hand. Hand in hand, they walked to the center and mingled with the other couples. Darren placed Nadine's hands on his shoulders. She hesitated at first, maybe unsure of what to do. "This festival happens every year, but I've never danced like this with a man before," Nadine said shyly. "No need to be shy, it's just me. You'll get used to being around me. We'll be spending a lot of time together," Darren said. "I'm going to hold your waist, okay? Just want to be sure, don't want to get slapped." "It's okay. It would be awkward if I were the only one holding you," Nadine replied. "I wonder where Edward is. Maybe he already went home," she added. Darren gently placed his hands on her waist and kept his gaze fixed on her. They locked eyes and started to dance. Something stirred in Darren's heart as he looked into Nadine's eyes and memorized her face. She was beautiful, especially when she smiled at him. He realized just how much he had buried himself in work. He hadn't dated in years, hadn't even thought about relationships. An hour passed, the music still slow and romantic, and the cold breeze intensified. Darren noticed their bodies had drawn close, Nadine resting her head on his shoulder. Time seemed to stop. For Darren, it felt like they were the only 2 people in the world at that moment. His heart was pounding so loudly it nearly deafened him. He wanted to ask Nadine if she felt the same, but he hesitated, unsure of what she might say. "Are you cold, Nadine?" he whispered. "Not anymore. I've got your jacket on," she replied. "But you'll have to get used to the weather here. It's always like this, especially at night." "I don't mind the cold," Darren said. "If it always meant nights like this, it would be worth it. Life in the countryside seems easier, especially if you've got someone to hold." "Now you're just imagining things. I only leaned on you a little and now your mind's running wild," Nadine said with a laugh. "I was just joking," Darren said with a smirk. "Would someone be mad if I held you close like this?" "Do you think I'd dance with you if I were already in a relationship?" Nadine replied. "Of course not," Darren answered, gently brushing her hair aside. This was the first time he felt truly comfortable with a woman, someone he knew had no hidden motives. He felt at peace whenever they were close. He had never allowed himself this kind of closeness before. His life had always been about work. A month passed, and Darren still hadn't found May in Silver Creek. He suspected she had already moved elsewhere. He couldn't tell how deep her resentment toward their mother was, but it was clear she had no plans of coming home. And in that 1 month, Darren's feelings for Nadine had changed. Ever since their dance at the festival, something inside him shifted. What was once just a passing connection had grown stronger. Now, whenever Nadine was near, his heart raced, because he had fallen in love. Nadine and Darren were out in the fields that day, checking on the rice crops. There wasn't enough water because of the heat, so they weren't planting just yet. Harvest season was next month. Instead, they inspected the fields for pests that might be damaging the crops. Just yesterday, they sprayed medicine, and Darren had volunteered to handle the sprayer. He realized he was slowly getting used to farm work, even though he still missed the hospital. At noon, they stopped working and settled under a big tree to eat lunch. Darren excused himself to relieve himself in the bushes. On his way back, he paused when he heard his phone ringing inside his jogging pants pocket. He pulled it out and saw that it was Julian calling, so he answered. "Do you need anything, Julian?" "How's the hospital?" Darren asked. "It's fine, but your dad went ballistic after finding out your sister May ran away. He and your mom had a huge fight. No matter how much you try to hide something like that, it'll come out eventually," Julian said with concern. "I figured this would happen eventually." "Thanks for calling. There's no signal where I'm staying now, so I couldn't update anyone," Darren said with a heavy sigh. "I get it. How are you holding up in Silver Creek?" Julian asked. "I'm all right," Darren said briefly. He was surprised that Julian knew where he was, since he never told him. "How'd you know I was here?" Darren asked. "Elle told me. She figured you'd follow May," Julian answered. "Ah, that explains it. But I don't think I'll find her here. It's been a month and there's still no sign of her. I might go home without her," Darren said sadly. "Just trust the process. You'll find her eventually," Julian reassured him. "I hope so," Darren replied, shaking his head. "All right, I've got to go. Talk soon." After hanging up, Darren returned and found only Edward sitting there. Delvin was gone. "Where's Mr. Delvin? Has he eaten yet?" Darren asked. "Yeah, he ate already. He was too hungry to wait for you. You took too long," Edward said. "Where'd he go? He's not around," Darren asked. "Not sure. Maybe he just went off for a bit," Edward replied. A few moments later, they started eating so they could return to work quickly. Darren was beginning to get used to the routine. Rice and vegetable soup, every day. It was healthy, though. Nadine also grew many vegetables in their backyard. Sometimes they had fish, sold door to door by vendors on motorcycles with megaphones. It had been a month since Darren ate meat. Even though he had money, he didn't buy any. He was learning to enjoy the simple life here. "How's your brother doing?" Darren asked Edward. "He's good. He's been asking why you haven't been by the house lately," Edward said with a smile. "Tell him I'll visit soon," Darren replied. Edward would go home to Santa Ynez, while Darren stayed with Delvin. It was too tiring for him to commute every day. "By the way, when's our next payday? I want to buy something for my brother," Edward asked. "Not sure. We'll just have to wait. Maybe they're still processing it," Darren replied. "Hope we get paid tomorrow. I have something in mind for my brother's girlfriend," Edward said, sipping water. They had just finished eating and tossed the banana leaves they used as lunch wrappers. Later, Darren would dig a shallow pit to bury all the trash and weeds to keep the area clean. "What are you planning to buy?" Darren asked. "A laptop. I want to gift it to my brother's girlfriend so she can work better online. She sacrificed a lot for him. I want to give back," Edward answered. "She really loves your brother. It's rare to find someone like her these days," Darren said. I know. I'm grateful he found the right girl, even with his disability, Edward said. You'll need at least 20,000 pesos for a decent laptop. Go to town and canvass prices so you'll be ready when it's time to buy, Darren advised. I'll go tomorrow, Edward said. An hour later, Delvin returned, smiling as he approached them. Where have you been, Mr. Delvin? Darren asked as they resumed work under the hot sun. I had something to take care of. Let's move over to that tree. We'll work there next, Delvin said and started walking. Darren and Edward stopped what they were doing and followed him. Did you go home? Darren asked. Nope, I picked up our salaries. That's why we're heading back early today to rest. This heat might make us sick, Delvin replied. All right. Darren nodded. Delvin handed them both white envelopes. Edward grinned as he received his pay. Afterward, they all headed home to rest. When they arrived at the house, Darren noticed Nadine was dressed up and freshly bathed, as if she were going out. She approached her dad and gave him a respectful gesture. Darren's heart skipped a beat again. He couldn't deny that he loved her. He overheard her asking Delvin for permission to go to town and sell some vegetables they had harvested. Delvin agreed and said he'd go rest. Edward offered to accompany her since he needed to buy something as well. He even invited Darren. Darren, however, had no plans of going anywhere. He just wanted to sleep. His whole body ached. Edward winked at him while tying the sack of vegetables to his motorcycle. Edward still didn't know about Darren's feelings for Nadine, but maybe he suspected. Nadine, on the other hand, remained quiet while sitting behind Edward. Darren followed closely behind them. She had a crush on Darren, which made her nervous when they were near each other, something that started back at the town festival. She tried to suppress her feelings, but it was hard now that they were living under the same roof. Her heart pounded when Darren placed both hands on her waist to keep her secure so she wouldn't fall. He also held her legs because the sack was on her lap. Once they arrived in town, Nadine asked Edward to go straight to the market so she could sell the vegetables. A short while later, the two men carried the sacks into the market. After Nadine got paid, they headed to the main area to look around. Edward said he had something to buy. Darren stayed quiet the whole time. Nadine planned to buy a cheap Android phone with the money her father gave her from his pay. 7,000 pesos should be enough. Are you buying anything, Darren? Nadine asked. Not really. Edward's the one shopping for a laptop for his brother, Darren replied. They stopped in front of a gadget store. Edward entered first, and Nadine was about to follow when Darren stopped her. Why? She asked. I know what you're planning to buy. Just hold on to your money. You're already handling everything at home. It's not right for you to always be the one taking care of me. Groceries, meals, Darren said. It's okay. I don't keep count, Nadine replied. I'm not planning to buy anything, so take it instead, Darren said. What were you planning to buy in there? He asked. An Android phone. Dad gave me money, Nadine replied. Don't buy one. I have an extra phone I haven't used. I brought it with the box, charger and headset, Darren said with a smile. I can't accept that. It's too much, Nadine replied, embarrassed. Don't be shy. I'm giving it wholeheartedly. It's just gathering dust in my bag. You might as well use it. Save your money. You'll need it eventually, Darren said, placing a hand on her shoulder. Thanks, Nadine said softly. Darren trailed behind Nadine as she walked. Edward had already bought the laptop. Darren noticed Nadine pause in front of a motorcycle store. Something wrong? Darren asked. Nothing. I was just looking at a motorcycle I wanted to give Dad. He said he wanted one with a sidecar to carry vegetables to the market, Nadine said. So Mr. Delvin knows how to drive? Darren asked. With a sidecar, he can balance it, but we'll probably never be able to afford one. They're just too expensive, Nadine replied sadly. Darren stepped closer and gently brushed her hair. Nadine looked up at him and smiled. "Just keep saving. You'll get there," Darren said. "I was hoping to give it to him for his birthday in April," Nadine replied, and resumed walking. Darren followed her into a grocery store, but he and Edward waited outside by the motorcycle. Darren kept his eyes on the storefront, waiting for Nadine to come out. "You've really been struck by love, bro. You should just tell her. Set yourself free. I've seen the way you look at her since the festival," Edward said. "Yeah, I know. I'll try," Darren replied. That afternoon, they went home. Edward planned to head back to Santa Ynez. When they got to the house, Delvin wasn't around. Darren went straight to his room to rest. Edward later said goodbye and left. Later in the day, he saw Nadine walking toward him. Edward and Delvin were working on the other side of the field. "Why are you here, Nadine?" "It's scorching hot. You should have waited and let Edward bring that," Darren said. "It's fine. I wasn't doing anything at home. By the way, I'm heading to town later. Do you need anything?" Nadine asked. "Nothing in particular," Darren replied curtly. He furrowed his brows, wondering why she was going to town. Maybe she needed to buy something. Then again, he didn't have the right to question her. There was nothing official between them. Still, one thought crossed his mind. Maybe she was meeting someone she'd been texting. "What are you doing in town?" Darren asked. "Just buying something," Nadine replied. "You sure?" "Maybe I should come with you. Will you have a ride?" Darren asked. "Edward's taking me. I already told him," Nadine said, smiling mischievously. "All right, be careful," Darren said and turned away before she noticed his mood. He didn't like what he was feeling. It wasn't right. He had no claim on her. Still, he couldn't help it. Was he jealous? That afternoon, they wrapped up and headed home. The harvested rice was placed in the warehouse. There was still 1 more hectare left to reap. The landowner must really be wealthy. He was probably the main rice supplier in all of Silver Creek. Darren stood under a tree, resting. Delvin was by the roadside, while Edward went to pick up Nadine from town. Darren noticed a white car approaching Delvin's direction. Curious, he walked across the field to see who was inside. He felt a strange nervousness. When the car door opened, Darren craned his neck to see who got out, and his eyes widened. It was May, his sister. She was smiling broadly as she spoke with Delvin, but what caught Darren's attention was her noticeably swollen belly. She was clearly pregnant. He clenched his fists at the sight. She was too young for this. Was this why she ran away? So their parents wouldn't find out? What would their mom and dad say when they found out? Their father would explode for sure. May turned pale when their eyes met. Her expression changed immediately. Darren guessed she cut the conversation short with Delvin and got back into the car. Darren's mind was spinning. He needed to confirm everything with Delvin, but not now. He didn't want to reveal his identity just yet. "You should have come over, Darren. That was Sir Dominic's wife. Would have been nice for you to meet her," Delvin said cheerfully as he walked back. So it was true. May, Darren's younger sister, was in a relationship with Dominic, the wealthy landowner who owned the entire farm and estate in Silver Creek. Darren was furious. Dominic was rich. Couldn't he have chosen someone his own age? May was just a teenager. 19 wasn't a minor, but she hadn't even finished school. He felt like punching someone. He couldn't sleep until he talked to both May and Dominic. "Mr. Delvin, where exactly is the estate? I'd like to visit sometime," Darren asked. "About 10 meters from here. Just walk straight. You'll see the big gates labeled Dominic Estate," Delvin replied. Darren nodded and told him he wouldn't be walking home with them that evening. He needed to stop by town. He wasn't proud of lying, but he had no choice. Once Delvin left, Darren walked straight to Dominic's estate. At the gate, he found a man standing guard who looked him up and down, trying to assess him. I'm here to see someone, but please don't mention my name. We're siblings and we had a fight. I just want to see her," Darren explained. Moments later, the gate opened and May came out. She was shocked to see Darren. Without a word, he grabbed her arm and pulled her aside. "You're coming home with me, May. This isn't right. Dad's furious. Mum's heartbroken," Darren said. "I'm not going back, Darren. If I do, they'll never let me come back here. Please let me stay. I love Dominic," May pleaded, trying to pull away. Darren remembered she was pregnant and quickly let go. "What happened to you? Did we fail you? Did he force you into this?" Darren asked. "Number I chose to be here. Dominic loves me," May said. "That's not love, May. If he really loved you, he would have waited until you graduated. If he was a real man, he would have faced our parents before getting you pregnant. Instead, you're about to be a mother at this age," Darren scolded. "Enough, Darren. I know what I'm doing," May insisted. "Please, May, come home. You have no idea what you've put us through. Your life doesn't end here. There's more waiting for you beyond being a teen mum. Trust me, you'll regret this," Darren said. "Since when is having a child a mistake? How would you feel if Mom and Dad told you that you were a mistake? That's what you're saying about my baby," May replied, crying. Darren stepped back, stunned. He had never seen her so serious. Then Dominic emerged from the gate. He looked shocked to see Darren. They locked eyes, sizing each other up. Darren couldn't even guess who was older, but Dominic definitely looked rich. Darren didn't care. "You bastard! I could have you arrested for hiding my sister and for getting her pregnant. You're old enough to know better," Darren said. "I was planning to talk to you all. May just didn't want me to," Dominic said. "A sorry won't fix this. I'll be waiting for you in the city. If you don't show up, I'll drag you through hell," Darren warned, pointing a finger at him before walking away. He had to be there when May and Dominic faced their parents. He needed to stop their dad from doing something terrible. He took a deep breath, walking back through the dark road alone, not caring about the cold. His heart was heavy with disappointment. Even his own sister wouldn't listen to him. He thought he could convince her to come home. He was wrong. Love really was powerful. Even he was guilty of the same. He was in love too. But unlike his sister, his love came with guilt, because he had lied about who he was. He now planned to return to the city. But before leaving, he needed to tell Nadine the truth, how he really felt. Meanwhile, Nadine couldn't sleep, knowing Darren still hadn't returned. Her father told her Darren had gone to town to buy something, but it was already late and he hadn't come home. She would have slept peacefully if she didn't care, but she was really worried. Now she was standing outside the house, craning her neck as she looked down the road, hoping Darren would appear at any moment. But still, no sign of him. She had forgotten to ask Edward for Darren's number. Maybe he was at Edward's place. Then she saw him. Darren finally arrived. She ran to meet him, frowning when she noticed how downcast he looked. "Where have you been?" "Why are you only getting back now?" Nadine asked, lightly slapping his shoulder. "Don't ask me anything right now, Nadine. I'm not feeling well," Darren said, and without warning, pulled her into a hug, resting his head on her shoulder. "Where did you go?" Nadine asked again, but Darren didn't answer. He was still hugging her. There they stood in front of her house. She hoped her father wouldn't come out and see them like this. "Why are women like this, Nadine?" "So stubborn. They never listen to advice. They just follow what their hearts scream at them," Darren said. Nadine furrowed her brow, not understanding what he meant. She guided him behind the house, where they both sat on a large rock. "How am I supposed to respond when I don't even understand what you're saying?" Nadine asked. "My sister ran away while she was still in school. Turns out she ran off with some rich boyfriend. He owns the farm we work on. And now I find out she's pregnant. I tried to convince her to come home, but she wouldn't listen. It's so stressful. She's only 19 and already wants to be married," Darren said, shaking his head. Your sister made a choice to get pregnant early. You can't force someone like that. What matters is if the guy is serious about her. My concern is when they're not. That's why I don't date rich guys anymore. I've been left before because we didn't come from the same background. I don't want to go through that again," Nadine replied. She noticed Darren was staring intently at her, sadness in his eyes. "It's not about being rich, Nadine. That guy simply didn't love you," Darren said. "Well, I'd rather live simply with a man who understands that," Nadine said, while Darren felt crushed by her words. So that's her issue. She didn't want to be with a man who had money. Darren suddenly didn't feel like confessing anymore. He would just leave without saying anything about how he felt. They talked more. He learned that Nadine actually wanted to be a doctor someday. Another month passed. It was now April. Delvin's birthday was coming up. Darren had decided to fulfill the old man's dream of owning a motorcycle with a sidecar. Before going home, Darren wanted to leave behind something meaningful for someone who had welcomed him so warmly. He and Edward were now in town, buying the motorcycle and having the sidecar custom built. He brought Edward along and told him his plans. "What are your plans when you go home? Will you keep working at the farm with Mr. Delvin?" Darren asked. "You're leaving? When?" Edward asked. "In a few days, after Mr. Delvin's birthday. There's been some trouble back home, and I also found out that the family I was looking for no longer lives in Silver Creek," Darren explained. "I'll keep working as long as I'm here. I don't plan on returning to the city anyway, but we'll keep in touch, right? We have each other's numbers," Edward said with a heavy tone. "Of course," Darren nodded. "By the way, did you ever tell Nadine how you feel?" Edward asked. "Not yet. Maybe when I come back," Darren said. A few days later, it was Delvin's birthday. Darren and Edward left early to pick up the motorcycle and sidecar. A neighbor offered them a ride so Edward could drive it back later. The house was quiet when they left, as if nothing was being prepared for Delvin's birthday. Darren also bought a box of cake and ordered ready-made food so they wouldn't have to cook later. When they got home, they saw Delvin sitting on a rock. Darren lit the candles with a matchstick Edward had brought. Delvin had just turned 60 and still dreamed of driving a motorcycle with a sidecar. Then he and Edward walked toward the house, singing Happy Birthday. Delvin turned, smiling, and approached them. "Happy birthday, Mr. Delvin. Edward and I really wanted to make your day special," Darren said with a big smile. "You really went through all this trouble? Thank you both so much," Delvin said, getting emotional. "It's nothing, sir. Go ahead, blow out the candles and make a wish," Edward said. Delvin did so. Then they saw Nadine step outside, smiling warmly at the sight. That afternoon, everyone enjoyed the feast Darren had prepared. They all ate together. When night fell, it was time for Darren to give his heartfelt gift. They were all outside now. Darren stood beside Nadine, facing Delvin. "First of all, thank you so much, Mr. Delvin, for your kindness. You let me stay in your home without judgment. Before I leave, I want to give you something small there so you'll remember me," Darren said with a smile. Nadine hadn't realized how hard it was to say goodbye until that moment. When she looked at her father, his smile had disappeared. "What do you mean, you're leaving? Where are you going?" Delvin asked. "I won't be working at the farm anymore. I'm going back home. There's been trouble. But before I go, this is for you. I fulfilled your wish of owning a motorcycle with a sidecar," Darren said, pointing at the parked vehicle nearby. "Really? That's for me?" Delvin asked in disbelief. "Yes, sir," Darren replied softly. Delvin hugged him tightly, tears audible in his voice. "Thank you so much, son. I'm happy, but also sad. We've spent months together here," Delvin said. "I'll come visit, Mr. Delvin," Darren assured him. "You better," Delvin replied. 4 months had passed since Darren returned to the city. He couldn't forget the heaviness he felt when he said goodbye to Nadine. Everywhere he looked in his hospital office, he saw her face. He thought his feelings would fade with distance, but they only grew stronger. He and Edward called each other regularly. Through these calls, he kept track of how Nadine was doing. She was okay, Edward would say, and still didn't have a boyfriend. Darren never dared ask for her number, knowing she didn't want anything to do with rich men. That meant he probably didn't stand a chance. One afternoon, he heard a knock on his office door. "Come in," Darren called out. The door opened and Julian walked in, eyes on Darren. He must have completed the favor Darren asked for, finding an eye donor and arranging surgery for Edward's brother, as well as setting up a full scholarship for Nadine to study medicine. "You all right?" Julian asked. "You're back, but you don't look happy. This about your failed romance?" Julian smiled knowingly as he placed a photo on Darren's desk, one of Darren and Nadine smiling side by side. "You snooped through my stuff?" Darren said, frowning slightly. "You two look great together, but she's not into you, huh? No wonder you haven't accepted a single operation in 4 months," Julian said teasingly. "Whatever. How's that favor I asked?" Darren asked, changing the subject. "It's done. But don't break me and Elle up, or we're through. The surgery is set for the last week of the month. I spoke with your friend. He agreed, but he had a lot of questions," Julian said with a laugh. "Thanks, man. I can always count on you," Darren said gratefully. "No problem," Julian replied with a smile. Meanwhile, Nadine had been deeply sad since Darren left. She waited for him to call, but months passed, and he never did. She now realized how heavy it was to carry unspoken love. Thankfully, her father hadn't noticed her sadness and hadn't asked any questions. Edward would say Darren was doing fine, since they still kept in touch. Nadine started planning a trip to the city and asked Edward to take her, since he was bringing his brother to the hospital for his eye surgery. She agreed, thinking this might be her chance to see Darren again and finally embrace him. At the same time, Darren remembered that today was the day of Edward's brother's operation. He wanted to visit, to check on the friend who had done so much for him, but he was too lazy to get up that morning. Around noon, he hurried to shower and change. He drove to the hospital wearing his freshly washed lab coat. What he didn't expect was who would walk into his office that day. "Darren, you're a doctor," Edward asked in disbelief. Darren stood up and hugged him tightly. "It's been a while," Darren said, patting Edward on the back. "Really? And that doctor I spoke with didn't even tell me it was you who helped my brother?" Edward said as he pulled away. "I asked him not to. Long story how I ended up in Silver Creek. Let's talk when we've got time," Darren said, smiling. "But seriously, thank you. I can't repay your kindness," Edward said, visibly emotional. "Your brother became important to me too. I wanted him to see the world again, and especially the beauty of his girlfriend," Darren said. "Yeah, but I'll never be able to repay you," Edward said, shaking his head. "You already did, just by being a good friend to me in Silver Creek. You didn't leave me hanging," Darren replied, smiling. Meanwhile, Nadine was shocked when Edward told her he'd asked her father for permission to take her to the city. He explained that Darren had helped arrange the surgery for his brother's eyes and now wanted to meet her to offer a full scholarship so she could study medicine. If she accepted, she could enroll immediately. It was a huge opportunity, but she still needed to discuss it with her father. 2 hours later, they arrived at the hospital. Edward asked Nadine to go ahead while he bought something. Nadine was overwhelmed by the size of the building, but she kept walking forward until she saw Darren up ahead, his back turned toward her. She couldn't be mistaken. It was him. She'd spent months with him in her home. He was wearing a doctor's uniform, which confused her. She had thought he was a farmer. Without thinking, she ran toward him and hugged him from behind. "I missed you, Darren," Nadine whispered. Darren turned around and she looked up into his smiling face. "I missed you too," Darren said, kissing her on the forehead. "How are you a doctor? I thought—" Nadine trailed off, her brow furrowed. "It's a long story. Remember how I told you my sister ran away? She ran off with her boyfriend to Silver Creek, so I followed her there. Turns out her boyfriend was our boss, Dominic," Darren explained. "That makes sense now, but still, it wasn't fair that you didn't tell me," Nadine said, shaking her head, half pouting. "Sorry, but what I feel for you, that was never a lie. I didn't get to tell you back then, but I'm telling you now. I love you, Nadine," Darren said, as he led her to the garden behind the hospital, where flowers were blooming. "About what?" Nadine asked, her heart racing. "My feelings for you. I love you deeply, and I don't care if you're not interested in rich guys. What you have is worth more than money. If a simple life is what you want, I'd live it with you," Darren said, smiling. Nadine smiled back, looking into his eyes. She could see he was sincere. "I love you too, Darren. That whole thing about me not wanting a rich guy, that disappeared after you left. I couldn't bear being without you," Nadine said, throwing her arms around him. Months later, Darren proposed. Nadine accepted right away. She was sure of him, and soon they were getting married.